Hello students, today we are going to read the story that is The Tree, which is being written by Manoj Das. And as you know, Manoj Das is a prolific writer who hails from Odisha, okay? And to his credit, he has written a number of stories, number of articles and some poems. That's why he is a very renowned person in Odisha, and presently he is working as the professor in Sri Aurobindo Institute, Pondicherry. Okay, so this is all about Manoj Das. So now let us discuss about the chapter. The name is tree. What is the symbolic significance of tree? First of all, it protects our environment. Okay, so it protects our environment, and it is also regarded that tree is the best friend of human being. Normally we think it, okay, that a tree is the best friend of a human being because a tree saves a human being from a number of dangers. At the same time, in every aspect of life, the tree stands by us in order to help us in the time of need. It gives us wood, oxygen, fruit, everything is being provided by the tree. So, tree is the best friend of a human being. So now, here in this chapter, we are going to discuss about the tree. It is not a small plant. It is a big tree. Banyan tree. Okay. Banyan tree you must have seen. In childhood days, some kids, what were they doing? They were playing. Means they were swinging by holding the shoots of a banyan tree. So here the same banyan tree is being mentioned. Now, let us discuss the topic. What is written? Right from the time the season was on the brink of monsoon, the village elders had begun to look grave. Grave means serious. From the beginning of the monsoon, the villagers are looking serious. Why? There must be some reason. Because monsoon has come, and apart from this, it might be creating some difficulties on the part of the villagers. The sinister clouds formation in the mountains several miles away and a wide ring of uncanny aura around the moon had informed them that there were terrible days ahead. Because normally, look, so many times people are speaking, if the western sky is looking red during the sunset time, it is not good. Okay, means it is a bad omen. So likewise, it is also mentioned that the monsoon means there was black cloud formation around the, means in the sky. At the same time, there was uncanny aura around the moon, and it had informed that the villagers were thinking that terrible days are coming ahead, means they are going to face a number of danger. The flood came at little past midnight. So what had happened? The flood has already come. The flood has already entered into the village. Although the village abandoned in quality sleep, the jackals with their long moaning howls managed to wake up several people who called out to each other, and reassured of a collective awareness, soon gathered on the river bank with lantern or torches of dry twigs. The flames danced in the gust, making their faces alternately appear and disappear. So what is happening? The flood came in the midnight. In midnight, what were the people doing? They were sleeping peacefully, but still they were being wakened by the jackals, by the dogs, and by some other creatures. And then they woke up and they also gathered together. Means the villagers gathered together and they started their journey towards the river in order to see what is the condition. And how were they going? At that time there might not be electricity, because it is mentioned that they were holding lantern and dry twigs. Okay, means burning the dry twigs. That's why they are going there to the river in order to see its condition. Then what did happen? The moon was fully dropped. The moon was completely covered in clouds, and the star looks pale as the eyes of dead fish. Nothing such could be seen of the river, but one could feel its bulging and hear its hissing like a 1,000-hooded cobra. The wind carried the smell of crushed raw earth. So at the same time, what was the condition of the river? The river is mentioned, but at the same time there is a picture of the surrounding. The moon was completely covered by clouds. At the same time, it is also mentioned that the stars are also looking pale. It was not at all looking bright. And then nothing was visible on the river. Means the river was not completely visible because there was darkness. But they could able to hear the hissing sound of the river. The river was creating some hissing sound because of some problem, and because not some problem, because the river has been bulged with water. Okay, the river water has been swollen. The wind carried the smell of crushed raw earth, and in the wind there was the smell of crushed raw earth. Flood waters never entered this village. Although hardly a season passed without the river playing havoc with terror with the villages a couple of miles downstream. Downstream means some people are in the downstream, means they are in the down area. And this village where the writer Monosthas has mentioned in this chapter is little bit in the up area. So the river was quite tame for the villagers, and there was no flood. Only people who are living in the downstream, they are facing such difficulties. But at the same time, people who are living in the downstream, they know when to go on the roof or when to perch. Perch means sit on the tree. Means in order to save their life, people are taking shelter on the roofs as well as on the tree, because it might be possible that at that time there were not a number of pakka houses. There were the thatched houses were there. That's why people are shifting their house in order to take shelter. And how many days they are remaining there on the trees or on the roof? They were remaining for 3-4 days, and after that they were descending, means they were getting down. But even though the flood did not enter this village, it nibbled at the high ridge, and once in a village gobbled off a chunk of the grassland stretching along the bank. But even when the river, the flood water has not entered into the river, into the village, still the river has been eaten up by the flood water. The villagers felt scandalized every time their familiar tame river expanded and looked alien and began hissing. And the villagers were feeling terrible. They were very afraid of all these things, because it is also mentioned that the villagers, they have never ever seen that the river was playing terror. Then the river was creating some terror for them. At the same time, the river was behaving like an alien, means it was just behaving like a foreigner for the people. It gave the sort of shock which one experienced when a domestic animal suddenly went crazy, behaving wildly and not responding to any amount of endearment. One just looked on helplessly, and how the river was behaving. Sometimes means on that particular day the river was behaving as if the animal was tame, but suddenly it was behaving wild, and it was not showing any sympathy, any mercy, nothing is being shown there. That's why the villagers were also quite scandalized. They are terribly afraid of it, what is going to happen. And that is what the villagers were doing. When they suddenly realized that the situation was much more grave than they had imagined, they heard a chugging and a faint sound of voices already tired and cracking. They raised their lantern. At that the voice grew more plaintive. Plaintive means protesting also. The villagers strain means to stretch, okay, strain their eyes to see through the darkness and the mist. And at that time the villagers heard something, some noise, and they also stretched their eyes in order to see what is happening. But it was not possible to see in that darkness. And a few of them could make out the black lump passing on the ashen waters, and shouted the only sensible advice that could be given to a boat caught up in the first rush of flood. Hey peasants, so what had happened? A boat is drowning. That's why it was creating too much noise. And it is mentioned that when the villagers get to know about it, hey peasants, as soon as it is down, the villagers downstream will throw ropes and save you. Keep on shouting, God be with you. And they are speaking that the boat is drowning, and as soon as it will go to the downward, then at there the villagers will catch you. They will save you by throwing ropes at you. Such boats generally came from the forest at the foot of the mountains, where they went to collect timber. Sometimes they were given another stock advice: throw away the load and make the vessel lighter, but don't go too light. A too light vessel became a plaything for the rollicking waves. And here these type of boats are being taken to the forest in order to carry the woods. But apart from this, it is also mentioned that means when the boats are quite heavy, they are being told that you should throw some of the wood pieces, but it should not be too light, because a too light vessel is a plaything for the water. The sound from the darkness became fainter and remote, random syllables blown away by the erratic wind. And here the wind was blowing means very dangerously. It was very sudden gust of wind was blowing, and here it is mentioned the sound became fainter and fainter. And the wind grew stronger and colder, and soon accompanied by a thin shower, and there was chill wind, and there was little bit shower, means it started drizzling. All ran to take shelter under the banyan tree. So there was the banyan tree near the river, and everyone who came to the river bank in order to see the condition of the river, they started running to the banyan tree in order to save them from the drizzling. The wicks of the lantern had to be turned low so that the glass cooled down enough not to crack at the splinters of raindrops. So here the wicks of the lantern is being turned down. It was slow so that the glass will not crack. The leaves chattered incessantly their familiar language of hope and courage. The innumerable boughs that spread overhead had been the very symbol of protection for generations, affording shelter not only to those who bore love and regard for the tree, but even to such people who had been impudent towards it. Of course, so far as the latter were concerned, only after humbling them to their knees. So here, the tree was singing its familiar sound of hope as well as courage. The innumerable boughs means the small trees, the small plants that had taken birth around the tree. It was the symbol of protection for generation, means the tree was protecting all the miniature boughs, all these small saplings, okay, from generation. And the tree was giving shelter not only to those people who are having love and respect for the tree, even to those people who are cruel to it. But the tree was there to make people realize their own fault, and the people are bowing down and kneeling down in front of the tree. The elders would point at a mound covered with grass, and there was a mound. Mound means what? Small hill type. Okay. And point a mound covered with grass and shrubs not far from the tree, while citing the ancient most proof of this fact. So there was a small mound, and the mound was covered with grass and shrubs, some small plant. And it is also mentioned that people are thinking there is a story behind it. And what is the story? The mound had decayed through centuries, but it was still as high as 2 men. So 2 men means almost 10 feet height. They did not expect anyone to ignore a fact so solid and as high as 2 men. And people are unable to ignore the fact because the fact was too solid. And people are bound to believe it because something has happened. And the mound is the proof of that one. And what had happened? The mound contained the ruins of a certain king's palace. So what is that mound? That mound was the ruin of a certain king's palace. It was neither possible nor necessary to recall the name of the king who had built it, or whether he had been of the solar or the lunar dynasty. What was frequently recalled was that he had dared to cut down a few branches of the tree to make room for his palace. Perhaps he had planned to cut more, perhaps even to totally destroy the tree. But before he could do so, a terrible storm had broken out. The palace collapsed. The king and his family took shelter under the tree and were saved. The king clasped the tree and wept. The storm subsided. And what is the tree? What was the story behind the mount? There was a king. And the king was building palace for himself. And what was the king doing? The king was cutting down some of the branches of the tree so that it was easy on his part to build his palace. So in the meantime, when the king was planning to cut down the entire tree, a terrible storm came and the palace was completely collapsed. And the king, along with his family, took shelter under the tree. And the king held the tree and repented for his mistake. And after all, at the end, the storm was subsided. Then the king and his family were saved. Further back in time, it was said the tree had taken off and flown to the Himalayas or other such meaningful places at the behest of a certain great soul who lived under it. And there is also saying that the tree has been, means the root of the tree, it's spreaded up to Himalayas. Okay, it is just saying by the people. But that was in the era of truth, and in the absence of some concrete evidence like the moon to support this. And this was happening in the era of truth, Satya Yuga. Okay, so in the era of truthfulness, it was happening, but as there was no proof, people are not talking about it. Elders of the present generation spoke relatively less about it than had their predecessors. So people are not speaking on it. Their forefathers were speaking on it, but people are not superstitious to speak on these things. The trunk that had once been clasped by the tree had decayed and disappeared since time immemorial. Means since ancient time, the trunk had been disappeared, which was being held by the king. After sending down numerous, means a number of shoots of the banyan tree, which had formed new trunk. The tree, with its branches spreading over an acre, resting on this trunk, had become an institution long ago. And here, the shoots that has come down, it became the trunk. The original trunk has been disappeared. Okay, now the shoots of the banyan tree is becoming the trunk of the tree. At the foot of one of the trunks rested the tiny banyan goddess. Now, the important thing is that what were the things present at the root of the banyan tree? In one side rested the tiny banyan goddess. Banyan goddess was there in one side. She had no regular priest attached to her. Whoever so desired could approach her and sprinkle vermilion. Vermilion means what? Sindoor. Okay. So, and there was no regular priest, but whoever was going, they were bowing down and they were offering vermilion to the goddess. In the course of generation, the vermilion crust had come to account for the greater part of the goddess body. And in the flow of time, as people are offering vermilion in large quantity, that vermilion became part of the goddess body. And devotees ordinarily did not prostrate, means bow down, to show gratefulness themselves to her, but everybody while passing before her bowed enough for her sake to condense of his or her devotion. In matter complex and formidable in nature, the villagers prayed for the intervention of famous deities of distant temples, but small issues were preferred to her from time to time. So what were the villagers doing? Listen, whoever the person was going there, they were bowing down before the banyan tree. And the villagers, they were conveying small issues to the banyan tree, but big issues were being told in temples. Means big issues were being conveyed to the big gods and goddesses. Children in particular found her quite helpful in regard to crises arising from on-down homework. This is also correct. Small kids in village, what do? If they have not done the home task, then what will say? If the teacher will not scold me, then Ma, goddess, I will offer you one banana. Okay, so likewise, the banyan goddess was very fond of the school kids. On-done homework, mean homework which has been not done, or the ill humor of the pandits of the primary school. The area before the another trunk was usual site for the villager meeting. So in one side there was banyan goddess, in another side there was the place where village meeting was taking place. Relaxing beside a neighboring trunk, eyes shut and jaws moving. Eyes shut means eyes closed and mouth was moving. In a leisurely rhythm could be found the most revered, means respected, sacred bull of the village. And in another side, the sacred bull of the village was taking rest under the banyan tree. So three things are there till now. One is banyan goddess, second one is village meeting, third one is the sacred bull. In the afternoon of the bi-weekly market days, an old woman coming from a village on the horizon sat leaning against another trunk with a sack half filled with greens and a drumstick. The market still 2 miles distance was her goal, but her niece, so declared with a quite toothless laugh, had refused to serve her anymore, obliging her to sell her wares sitting there. At sunset, she would raise and offer a handful of whatever still remained in her sack to the sacred bull. So in another side, look, in one side, banyan goddess. Another one, village meeting. In another side, sacred bull. In another side, there was a lady, and the lady was going to the bi-weekly market. But sometimes, almost all the day's time, she was feeling tired. And what was she doing? She was sitting under the banyan tree and selling her goods. And whatever the things were remaining, it was not sold. She was offering it to the sacred bull. And at sunset, she would rise and offer a handful of whatever still remained in a sack to the sacred bull. In a hollow of the foot of another trunk resided a family of snakes. In another side there was a family of snakes. Okay, means snakes were also living under the foot of the banyan tree, which had earned the reputation of being conscientious. Means having conscience, they are not harmful, they are harmless. and harmless, and in the branches above rested a legion of birds, and on the branch birds were on the branches. Okay, so these things are present, means these things are associated to the banyan tree. First one is the banyan goddess was there, and village meeting was taking place, and sacred bull was also sitting, a woman was also selling her goods, and a family of snakes were also living, and on the branches the birds were also living there. And the tree was taken to be immortal, and all were thinking that the tree is immortal, the tree is not subject to death. All, by all, without any having to be told about it, immortality being an attribute of the gods, it was godly. And as people are thinking that the tree is immortal, and immortality is the quality of God, so the tree was called godly. Means all are having the belief that the tree is having some supernatural power, and the tree is regarded as a goddess. Nobody would easily flout a decision that had been arrived at the meeting, in a meeting under the tree, for even when the decision was unpalatable to a party. So, if a decision was taken under a tree, no one was able to speak against it. It knew that behind it there was the seal of some power, invisible and inaudible though. So all are thinking that behind all these things there was some power. It might be inaudible, it might be invisible, but still people are unable to deny, to obey an order which is being passed under the tree. It means people of the village, they were having high respect for the tree, and they were thinking that the tree is not an ordinary tree, it was a godly tree, it was a supernatural tree. That's why they were also praying goddess. Okay, means they were praying banyan goddess, and they were also not only praying, but they were also offering vermilion, and some other times some goods were also offered to that goddess. Okay, thank you.